Hi, it's Leigh here, and I'm really excited today to bring you my latest video, which is the making of Mount Kate House. So thank you, and enjoy. So I start off all my paintings with the inspiration. This time it's just a few photos that I took on location. I was lucky enough actually to get a bird swooped down and land on the post. The next step was creating a small study sketch, which sort of cemented the composition. Probably 3 hours to do this small sketch. The next step was the underpainting, which is in this case a grisaille I did, which is basically burnt umber and a wet rag, and just wiped away the paint where I didn't need it. So it created this sort of luminous effect. It was time to paint over that underpainting. This time I've already established the sky, and I'm just blocking in the cabin and establishing the proportions. So here I'm just re-establishing the cabin. I thought it was too thin, so I just lowered the veranda and just made it a bit sort of deeper or taller. Also, it was time to sort of establish where the trees are going to be, so just put some trunks in. Here it's time to establish a bit more detail in the landscape at the far left, and also placed in that fence. And I'll rework the cabin, just probably a second stage block in. Still looks a little rough at this stage, but every layer sort of helps build that up. But it was time to add, more detail to the grass in the foreground, so I established this. So here I was never really happy with this tree line on the right. Really wanted to create a ridge line further back to add more depth. And I thought I'd re-establish a bit of the sky, play around with some clouds, but yeah, once again I wasn't really happy with too much information there, taking your eye away from what ultimately was going to be the sort of front fence, etc. Once I was happy with that ridge line, it was time to add in the trees. Basically block all that in right inside, get that sort of mostly finished actually before moving on to painting the fence in front of it. So here I start working the main gum tree in the back left, sort of going over, putting sky holes in, taking branches out, putting branches in, adding more sky, adding less sky. I really battled with this tree to start with. So here, just reworking that bank at the far left and just establishing a row of trees along the top of that. Once again behind that I put that ridge in at the back just to create a bit more depth through the trees and a bit of interest. It's time to still move on with this block in, so it was really onto that fence just in front of that row of trees. But it sort of had to be more than a block in. It really had to be sort of finished before I could really move on to the front fence. So I used to use a bit of masking tape along the top and the bottom just to guide it, and so it just didn't make a mess of everything above or below it. So moving on finally to the front fence, probably one of my favourite parts of this painting. Just love adding that foreground detail. So really I'm just establishing the rails. Obviously the rails are behind the palings, so that had to be done first, and pretty much detailed because it's too hard to do it in between the palings. So I'll just run some sort of perspective masking tape just to get the look of the height at the top and the bottom, and then just worked away on these rails. Looks like they're suspended in mid-air, which is pretty cool. Well, this painting was the first time I've ever painted anything timber. So I've got a timber cabin, timber fences, a lot of timber. But it was pretty cool starting on this front fence to really get a gauge of the whole painting now. Now I did this in dark paint because I wanted to really go dark, establish sort of that background colour to those palings. So moving on to this left side of the fence here, and look, this is always the closest to the viewer, so you know the palings sort of got bigger as they come along to you. Once again, it's dark to light. I'm just using a T-square from the top of the painting just to get, every now and then, get a straight sort of paling in there to make the fence sort of look straight at least. Building up those layers, obviously we're going from dark to light, just really varying the strokes and the colour. A lot of different colours in this. I've got a bit of Dioxazine Purple, a bit of Payne's Grey, a bit of Burnt Umber, Titanium White obviously. So much the same here, just really adding another layer, it just gets slightly lighter. And look, I'm actually painting in natural light here to the left of me, which is probably the first time this whole painting that I actually had some natural light on the weekend, so it's great to do that. Looks a bit light for the video, but it's time to dive back into that cottage and get another layer in there of depth and details. I'm adding a lot of shadows, getting the direction of the shadows right, a bit more light in certain areas, another run of the pass of the roof. I always use a T-square whenever I want a nice straight line. I don't do it all the time, but just to give me a gauge of where I'm at. Well, wouldn't typically be a front fence, or front fence of a house at least, without a gate, so it's time to paint that in. Now it's just the same method as the fence. Now it's time to start building up that trunk, just to highlight the portions of that where the light would be hitting it. Well, the time finally arrived to have another go at that gum tree. I'm just establishing the trunks here. And it's a good idea, I think. Oh, look, I've never really painted a gum tree before, so it's probably the first time for me anyway, but just to work out which direction your branches are going first, I think. And then probably add the foliage in later. It's time now to move back onto that gate, which I'd left quite dark, so time to get it matching the rest of the fence. While I was there, I was just adding texture upon texture to these posts and palings. It took quite a bit to get looking right. So close to the viewer, so they had to really pay a lot of attention to them. Obviously the fence was looking pretty flat against this sort of untextured grass, so it was time to add in the grass up to the fence and the shadow. The shadow really made this fence pop where the sun was shining through it. You need that sort of shadow areas in the painting just to bring something to life. It certainly made this fence come to life. Now I'm constantly working in zones, so it was time to move back onto that cabin, really make that come to life as well. It was looking very rough. It's time to smooth out all those bad edges. Get back into those windows, add some highlights. Also where the sun hits those posts, really try to make them stand out against that grey background. Now where I had those shadows in earlier to the fence, I've obviously painted over a bit of the fence, so we're still applying another layer basically, just another lighter value again, just still bringing that forward. And it's starting to almost get to the end. Moving along this fence now, and we're starting to hit the top of our Turner range for at least its fence. It's not, you can't really use white for this. It's not, the fence is not white, it's just timber, so we've stopped about here with a value. Most of this is also painted with sort of like a triangle dagger, also a little bent 00 spotter. Well, it's time to add in the gatekeeper. This is the Black Currawong that flew down almost 3 meters away from me that time when I visited there. I really wanted to hero this bird and sort of keep it natural. I didn't want to overblow the highlights. It's black anyway, so it's very hard to get that punchy and black. And when you look back at the original picture, you'll see that it's sort of blending in anyway. And I wanted to sort of honour that way rather than overblow it. It's time to straighten up a few edges, especially on the windows, the edges of the cabin, just a few of the straight lines in the painting, bottom of the deck. It really does help to use masking tape, and I suggest anyone who wants a straight line, a hard edge, it's a good idea. You can do this freehand, but it just saves a bit of time. Well, it's grass, grass and more grass. A lot of grass texturing between the fence, on the front foreground where it leads into the path. Really tidy up all this area, a bit more highlighting where the light hits. Darkened some of the shadows, but I really sort of left that alone, just stuck with the highlights mostly. Shaped the path a bit more. Well, you guessed it, more grass, this time on the left. Same thing really, but on the right side I left the highlights a bit higher. This side I sort of just blurred the shadow and the highlights away a little bit. This is not my main focal area. Need to be detailed enough, not over the top. Well, it's time to hold these palings on. It's time to nail the fence. I've varied these marks a bit. Some, blue, some rusty. Well, the final look over. Just a close up all the areas. I did after this just touch a couple little things, the next day or two you find little spots here and there that aren't quite right, but definitely nothing major. Got extra sky hole or tiny little dab or mark. At this point, I really do want to thank my son Ryan. He's just 13 years old, but he gave up his weekend to make every single track you hear on this video. Anyway, I'll leave you to enjoy Mount Kate House. If you'd like to leave a comment or like the video, please hit the like button, and please follow along for my art journey. See you next time.